Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Drinking Water and ELAP Fee Stakeholder meeting. We'll give it a moment and we'll get started in just a couple minutes. Thank you. Hey, good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome and thank you for joining us for the State Water Resources Control Board's Drinking Water and Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program Fee Stakeholder meeting. This meeting is being held virtually through Zoom and the webcast platforms, and also is being recorded. My name is David Ceccarelli, and I'm the Fee and Revenue Branch Chief within the Division of Administrative Services here at the State Water Resources Control Board. Today, we have many of the Fee and Revenue Branch staff working behind the scenes to ensure that you experience as few participation bumps as possible. If at any time throughout this event you find that you're having technical difficulties, please email the email on the screen, which is das-drinkingwaterfees@waterboards.ca.gov. Also joining me today is Pooja Vats, who is the Drinking Water and ELAP Manager in the Fee and Revenue Branch, and Pooja will be reviewing the budget cost drivers. Individuals that are attending through Zoom, please use the raise your hand function if you'd like to ask a question or provide any comments. If you're joining us through the webcast, you can also submit a comment or ask a question during the meeting by emailing the email on the screen. I do want to mention one thing. In the past, there have been a few delays in the broadcast, through the webcast. Therefore, through the meeting, staff may pause at times so we can catch up for the listeners. Again, thank you for joining us virtually today. We thank you for your patience as we move to this 100% virtual meeting space. We are doing our best to ensure everyone can participate in an effective manner. So I just wanted to go over a few meeting guidelines. Remember to use the handouts that were sent via email. If you don't have them, don't worry. We will be sharing the documents on the screen. You can request a copy of documents after the meeting, or the handouts are posted on the Water Board's fee webpage. Just a reminder again, if at any time you have any technical difficulties, please email us. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking. And let's review the agenda here so we can pull the agenda up. Thank you. So we're going to go over we're going to start with going over the Safe Drinking Water Account budget cost drivers. There are a couple of BCPs in there that we'll discuss. And then after that, we'll move to, we'll have a little open discussion about the drinking water program and the budget cost drivers. And then we'll move over to the ELAP budget cost drivers, have a discussion on ELAP. And then we'll have just an open discussion if anyone wants to bring up any comments or have any additional questions. And then we'll follow up with next steps, basically discussing the next stakeholder meeting. At this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over to John Russell, who's the Deputy Director of Division of Administrative Services, for some opening comments.
Thank you, David. Again, I just wanted to thank you all for taking a little bit of time out of your day today to come to this. This whole process really doesn't work unless we have stakeholder involvement. So we really appreciate that. And the other thing I want to say, which I say at every one of these meetings, but sometimes I forget and don't say it to the end, is that if you have if you want to talk to us about any of this offline, please don't hesitate to contact either David or myself, and we can set up a call with you or email, whatever you prefer. But yeah, we definitely want to be open and transparent about this whole thing. So if you do have any questions, just feel free to contact us. And with that, I'll turn it back over to David.
Hey, thank you, John. So let's move to the next slide. The next slide here, which is page 2 of your agenda. Thank you. So what I want to talk about first is the top table there. So this for the Safe Drinking Water account is basically the account in the water board's budget where the fee revenue is deposited and expenditures hit this account. Our budget allocation and our fee setting budget for 21-22 was $34.6 million. And our January proposed budget for 22-23. So in January, the governor released his proposed budget, and that budget was $38.9 million. And so it's a net difference of about $4.2 million. And what is that percentage change? Well, it's about 12.4%. So basically what this is reflecting is based on the governor's proposed budget, the net difference in revenue between what we set our fees off of last year compared to what's in, again, the January proposed budget is about $4.2 million or about $4.3 million. That is basically the needed revenue to cover all of our costs in fiscal year 22-23. So with that said, I was going to, the next category there is our budget cost drivers for fiscal year 22-23. So I'm going to move this over to Pooja Vat, who's going to explain some of those cost drivers there.
Hello, good morning. My name is Pooja Vat. Thank you to all our stakeholders participating today. So the 12.4%, I'm going to briefly cover the budget cost drivers that basically make up that 12.4. The first item that we have is state operations reflected in the 5.9%, approximately $2 million. And that basically includes employee compensation, retirement, and healthcare costs. And then we move on to two BCPs that we have. I'll talk a little bit about both, and then David, if there's anything that you want to elaborate on them, please feel free to. The first one is a BCP basically reflected as $952,000 in funding for 5 positions it will support 5 positions from the Safe Drinking Water account. And basically these positions make up about 3 technical positions and 2 IT positions that will go into developing a database for lead and copper data. So that's the first BCP, and it's shown here. The second one basically is the $911,000, which supports 4 positions. And of those 4 positions, 3 of them would be water resource control engineers, and 1 would be a senior water resource control engineer. And the purpose of these 4 positions would be for basically oversight of delegated public water systems in the San Diego region. And this could be an oversight that basically turns over to the water board later at the end of this fiscal year. So that's what that BCP is. And then we move on into section 4.05, the expenditure reduction. And this is basically a drill that came out of the Department of Finance. And it was basically to all state agencies to reduce their costs by about 5%. And so that's what's reflected here in the negative 1.3%. And basically our budget office, they found as a result of this that they found savings in operating expenses and equipment that included things like printing, postage, and travel. And these savings contributed to approximately $2.7 million. The final budget cost driver is listed as pro rata, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. That's reflected as negative 1.6%. So I actually, if I'm understanding this correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, David, but pro rata has gone down. And this is a cost that the water board pays for basically essential services. So things like state controller's office or California Highway Patrol. Those are examples of costs that relate to pro rata. So these are the cost drivers that are basically making up the 12.4%. The additional one is the deferral, and I'm going to let David speak to that.
Thank you, Pooja. Yeah, let me elaborate a little bit here. Back to kind of the budget cost drivers for 22-23. The pro rata, basically, Department of Finance, they evaluate our share of pro rata within our organization each year, and several of our funds have been reduced. Basically, it's basically that pro rata has been recalculated from prior years, and so in the Safe Drinking Water account, it has been reduced. And again, the pro rata helps pay for central services of other state agencies like Department of Finance, state controllers, treasurer's office, Cal HR, all those services that help the water board operate. So again, that there's been a reduction there. Going back to, of course, the section 4.05 expenditure reductions. Again, that was a drill for the Department of Finance, not just for the water board, but for all state agencies. They were asking agencies to look at ways of reducing their overall budget by approximately 5%. And so, as we mentioned kind of yesterday with the water quality and water rights funds, including the Safe Drinking Water account here, our budget office found some areas, and they're mainly in operating expenses and equipment. Again, things like travel, things like our normal printing costs and things like that. We found some savings there. And again, just kind of back to the BCPs here. And I know Darren, he could jump in later if he likes to have a little more discussion on this. But one, the lead and copper rule revision, regulatory development. Again, it was for 5 positions for $952,000. The division of drinking water will utilize and the requested 3 positions in technical operations section, regulatory development unit to reduce rulemaking backlog and develop the federal revised lead and copper rule and other new regulations, including addressing the 30% unregulated contaminants with notification levels and approximately 60 MCLs higher than the corresponding public health goals. The remaining 2 IT positions are necessary to develop the database to intake lead and copper data in compliance with lead and copper rule. And then again, the San Diego County Primacy Delegation Agreement termination. The water board for the division of drinking water requested $911,000 to support 4 permanent positions in the Safe Drinking Water account to carry out the public water system regulatory program for San Diego County upon the termination of county's primacy delegation agreements no later than it was June 30th of 2022. The oversight of the delegated public water systems would transfer to the state water board. So those are kind of high level overviews of the BCP and the financing of them. If you added those 2 up, you're looking about 5.3%, and that 5.3% is driving basically into the 8.3%, which again are the budget cost drivers for 22-23. Now we talk about a total of 12.4%, and so there's a difference of again 4.1%, which is basically the chart below. And last year through our discussions and going to the board, the water board received funding through what we refer to as the Water Resilience and Drought Package For those that were familiar with that, that was a multi-agency funding request. And the water board, they were authorized resources to expand the regional and their county-based drought emergency programs. Some of the programs that were impacted were community water systems, small water systems, domestic well communities, and drinking water received several positions, but we didn't fund all of those positions last year. And so a decision was made that we would defer those positions into this fiscal year through funding through the Safe Drinking Water Account. So again, last year we didn't fund all the positions with the Safe Drinking Water Account funding. And so this year we deferred those costs, and this year we're looking to pick up those positions with the fees. And so that amount is roughly about 1.4 million, which translates to about 4.1% of additional revenue. So when you look at the two tables there, the 8.3 and the 4.1, that's driving the 12.4% in needed revenue, which comes out to an increase of about $4.3 million. So that, again, goes back and translates to the top table there when we look at our fee setting budget of 34.6 and the January budget of 38.9. There's the 4.2 and the 12.4%. So at this point, I'm going to ask if there are any questions. What I do want to say is that it's early in the process. Of course, this is the first fee setting budget based on January's proposals. Internally, we continue to look at our fee revenue for the drinking water program, and then we of course monitor our expenditures. What I also want to say is that this is basically in a vacuum of looking at supporting our cost for 22-23 and not building in any fund reserve at this point. So I'm hoping at the next meeting that that working through our accounting office and having a year-end report for the year that they're working on right now, which is 2021, that I'll be able to report on a fund condition, which would show what we anticipate our fund reserve to be. So again, this is in a vacuum of looking at supporting our program cost for fiscal year 22-23 based on the expenditures from the January's proposed budget. And as we all know, this is subject to change basically when the May revise comes out. So again, I'd like to open it up to any questions at this time. So I'm not seeing anything right now. There's no hands raised through Zoom and/or I'm looking at it, and there's no questions through the webcast. Let me just open up and ask Darren if he'd like to add anything on the BCP proposals.
I could just add a little bit, David. The lead and copper revisions are in response to the federal rule changes that are coming, the inventory that has to happen, and it's building towards that. There will likely be additional resources needed to address that complex regulation in the future. So this is an early preparatory work here associated with it. And the San Diego one is a choice San Diego choose to give back their LPA program. So we're having to take that on in the division. There are now 27 counties, I think, that operate LPA of the 58 counties in California. So, but happy if there's other questions I can answer.
Thank you, Darren. It does not look like we have anything currently right now. I'll just give it a moment here. Well, what we'll do right now, let's move to ELAP. We could always come back and if there's further discussions on the drinking water finances, we can definitely discuss that. So what you're seeing here is the Environmental Laboratory Improvement Fund budget cost drivers. The Environmental Laboratory Improvement Fund helps support the ELAP program expenditures. What you're seeing there on the top table is our fee setting budget for 21-22, which was $4.3 million. So last September, we took a fee structure to the water board to cover our cost in 21-22 at $4.3 million. And then looking at in the January proposed budget, our costs are about $4.5 million, which are a net difference of $184,000, or excuse me, a percentage change of 4.2%. At this time, let me pass it back to Pooja, and Pooja is going to go over those cost drivers, which are driving the $184,000.
Yeah, so you have the three cost drivers listed here that basically make up that 184,000, the 4.2% change. The first line item is state operations, reflected as 6.9%, the 299,000. Again, that includes things like employee compensation costs, healthcare, retirement. That's what's encompassed by state operations. And then it moves into the reduction that applies to ELAP, which is the same, coming out of the same drill that came from Department of Finance, where state agencies were asked to reduce their overall budget. So that's reflected here as the 0.1% reduction. And then the last budget cost driver is the pro rata, and that's reflected as the negative 2.6%. Again, that's the water board's costs for essential services. So that's what's listed here. Those are the three cost drivers for ELAP.
So thank you, Pooja. Yeah, just to recap that, pro rata, I think, is through our conversations last year, there was a spike in pro rata for the Environmental Laboratory Improvement Fund. And we worked with the Department of Finance to get an explanation. And in prior years, going back to, I believe it was like 1819 and 1920, the pro rata amounts were on the lower side. And so the Department of Finance had adjusted them last year to make up some costs from the prior years in order for pro rata to have their fair share. And then as a result, though, they had mentioned to me last year that I could expect that pro rata levels would go down and it would balance each other out. And then in future years, we shouldn't see spikes in the pro rata. So this is what I anticipated last year when we were meeting with the stakeholders and then going to the board. So there was a reduction here, and you can see it as about $112,000. So what you're looking at right now, I just kind of want to make sure everyone's kind of clear here that based on, again, the proposed budget, that $184,000 of additional revenue would need to be collected to support the full budgetary expenditures in the ELAP program. And I know for the ELAP stakeholders, we've had many conversations about fees, and we looked at positions. And currently that this is funding 25 positions in the ELAP program. Now, last year, there were some internal salary savings put in place, meaning that 2 vacancies were held vacant. That's not reflected in this number. That's again supporting the full $4.5 million. What I will say is program staff, fee staff, We understand the concerns of the fees for ELAP program, and we are internally looking at other ways of finding some savings, meaning is there an opportunity for some of these positions to charge a different fund, or if there's another funding source. So we are looking at potentially 3 positions, charging another funding source. And if that's the case, then we'd be looking at some savings in expenditures, which puts us in a position to either minimize and or hold fees for this upcoming year. Now, I want to say that because we're only in the early part of the fee setting process. But I want to make sure that the fee payers understand that that ELAP and the fee branch here at the water boards are looking into avenues of trying to, again, hold or minimize these fees, knowing that there were fee adjustments over the last several years, but there were also reasons behind that, meaning that fees weren't increased for many years when it came over from California Department of Public Health, and then that the program changed the regulations, which basically meant we had to adopt a new fee structure for this program. So again, early in the process, but again, wanted to kind of show you what the cost drivers look like. And I'm happy to answer any questions at this time if anyone has any questions.
David, we do have one question for the drinking water side. Would you like to?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
All right. This one is from Jackson Family Wines, Suzanne Sekil. To be clear, the 12.4 increase is the minimum increase. It may actually be as much as 17.4%. If you need to completely refresh the 5% reserve.
So I'm not showing it again. If we were to use that as an example and said that our fund reserve, that our fund was starting at a 0 balance and I needed to build a 5% reserve, that would be an example. So we would be building, a 5% reserve, again, starting at a 0 balance. What I don't have right now, and again, soon I will, working through Fiscal and reporting requirements and getting the necessary reports for me to determine what the reserve is in the safe drinking water account. Based on that, again, if it's a 0 reserve and I need to build a 5% reserve, then you can anticipate, an additional charge to this amount here. But again, I'll be in a better position to discuss that come our next stakeholder meeting in June. And I think it's important to kind of understand, anytime you manage a fund, you need some type of reserve for economic uncertainties. What I will say, one of them that we've had to deal with in the past is after the fees are set and the budget has been adopted, there are continued negotiations with through the unions and through the classifications, and at times some of these negotiations are agreed upon after the fact. And what happens is that come mid-year, a budget letter comes in stating that an agreement has been agreed upon between classifications at the water board, and some employee compensation has been agreed upon, which has increased cost. And several times, as an example, instead of going back to the stakeholders and asking them for fee increases, we've been able to absorb those through the fund reserve. There's been opportunities, again, through COVID and things like that, where we've been able to drive down the reserve and help minimize fee increases. So again, I working closely with accounting. I'm hoping to have these reports in the next few months, and then I'll be able to be in a better position to explain what the fund reserve looks like. Are there any other questions through the email?
There are no other questions at this time, David.
And again, if anyone wants to ask a question through Zoom, please use the raise your hand function. So as John mentioned earlier, at any time, you go back, you start looking at these reports and you have any questions, these tables, please don't hesitate to reach out to, again, John or I, and, we'll be more than happy to go ahead and explain this and help answer any questions. So, we'll be happy to meet individually with you guys. And again, this is looking at the January proposed budget. Once we receive the May revise, we'll be updating these numbers, and we'll again be explaining those at our June stakeholder meeting. So let's go back to the agenda here. So that basically puts us at open discussion. And I just want to, again, reach back out to Darren if there's anything you'd like to add at this point, Darren.
No, thanks, David.
All right, thank you, Darren. And I just want to open it up to anybody if anyone has any questions.
Got a question from Debbie Webster there, David.
Oh, there we go. Hey, Debbie. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Well, thanks. And I just Debbie Webster, I'm with Civiqua. I really, first of all, appreciate you guys giving the presentation. And I'm here to talk a little bit about ELAP. I also really appreciate the just your effort in trying to keep costs down or not have increases, and even potentially not even minimizing costs and seeing some reductions. One of the things I wanted to talk about actually is not so much these control drivers, but the fee structure itself. So as was discussed in past years, there's been a lot of fee increases that were really huge amounts that were to the smaller agencies. And I think one of the ones that has been, I don't want to say problematic, but just felt egregious in some ways, has been the application or the cost when you have to modify your permit, because now there's a different method, and those method changes are due to ELAP. The way that it right now is divided is there's a division of 50 FOTs. What we'd like to see is a smaller minimal amount for some of those small labs, so that instead of being a $1,500 charge, which is like 3 times the base charge, that there is a smaller charge for changes of FOTs. Again, that's, method updates. Those are different areas. Those aren't necessarily some big things, but then there's also a missing piece, and maybe ELAP staff can respond to it or whatever, but or maybe it's just something to consider. But as new methods are being developed and pulled into California, a lot of those end up benefiting some of the specialty labs. And in hearing ELAP's presentation last week before the State Water Board, I know that they said, hey, the outside assessments do a lot, but I think that there's also a lot of work that ELAP has to do to look at these new methods, to get them in and get them in their process, and that the cost of that is not really reflected in the cost structure. So I guess what I would say is, instead of just doing it as a modified method, as we look at some of these new methods that are more specialty that are coming in, and we have labs that are trying to basically get a hold of that market, that a charge of $1,500 right now, which would be an amendment if they're an existing lab, is probably a lot less than what that true cost is. So that is where I think that the fees, not necessarily these drivers, I know this is early, but in preparation for the next meeting, maybe looking at some ways where we can, again, spread some of the equity and not just lump it on some of the smaller labs. That would be really appreciated.
Okay, thank you, Debbie.
Mhm.
I'm going to pass this on just to see if Christina or Katie, do you want to make some comments? I'll just add that, Debbie, as you know, the fee structure, the regulations, the fee structure is new, and it does take a little bit of time for staff to look at and evaluate the workload. And as you're familiar with a lot of our programs, that a lot of our fees are driven by, we look at the workload, and we do try to assess a fee to cover our cost. We're not 100% fee for service, but we do try to build that into some of the analysis when we do set our fees. It, again, kind of early on in the process, but let me move it on to Christine and let her shed some comments.
Yeah, thank you, David. And thank you so much, Debbie. I think this is why these meetings are really good, because we get comments like these that kind of spark ideas on how to support the program. And you're right, we do have laboratories that want to be in the program based on these new methods or new FOAs that state agencies are asking us to provide for them. So I really like that idea. And I think David's right. We're still early in the process, and we can start those conversations with those agencies and start talking about maybe adding more additional, amount to add those, and even talk about how we can help support the municipal agencies in a different fee structure so that it doesn't impact you as much. But thanks so much for that comment.
All right, thanks, Christine.
Thank you again, Debbie. Any other questions that we have through the email broadcast?
There are no questions at this time, David.
Thank you, Stephanie. And I'm not seeing any other questions through Zoom. I was just going to give it a moment here. We'll go ahead and move to next steps here. Our next drinking water and ELAP fee stakeholder meeting is scheduled for June 10th at 9 a.m. At that time, we'll be going over, of course, budgetary numbers. That's for that'll be coming out of the May revise. We anticipate that the May revise is released somewhere middle of May. So please just kind of heads up for that. You'll find information on Department of Finance's website. And again, as John mentioned earlier, if there's any questions after you review this agenda and these handouts, please, again, don't hesitate to reach out to me. So with that said, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We appreciate the dialogue. I want to thank my fee staff behind the scenes. I want to thank Darren and John and Christine through the programs. We have to work closely on this. So I appreciate all your time. So again, I hope everyone has a good day, and we'll be talking soon. Thank you.